All right, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Elijah, and I'm super excited to spend a little bit of time with you this morning before you get back to your busy day. But before we get started, I wanted to just quickly kind of call attention to recent events regarding the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, as well as Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and just communicate that Review Tracker stands with our Black employees as well as the Black community. We see you, we hear you, and right now we're working on some things on the back end to hopefully continue to support the Black community moving forward that we'll be communicating with you guys in the coming weeks. So, like I just said, my name is Elijah Carlberg, and I am the Talent and Culture Lead at Review Trackers. So a little bit about me. I actually moved to Chicago about 3 years ago now from Pennsylvania. I came to the city back in 2016 on a weekend trip, and I saw a concert at the Vic in Chicago. If you guys are familiar with it, I'm obsessed with music. So I decided that I wanted to move out here and kind of stay here for longevity and start my career here. So flash forward a year after I moved here, I started working at Review Trackers as a junior recruiter, where I was in charge with hiring and onboarding for all of our open positions. So since then, I've actually moved into management. I am now head of recruitment at the company. I'm also the lead on all of our recruiting initiatives, and I'm also the lead on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let's kind of get started. So the real reason why we're here is to talk about why does employee brand matter when it actually comes to your company. So I want you guys to kind of take a second and visualize Glassdoor, Google Reviews, and just really any other review platform as the window into the company's soul. So individuals on the outside, whether this is competitors, future customers, and definitely future hires who are interested in hearing and learning more about your organization, are going to be doing extra research ahead of time to make sure that your external communication and external image ends up in, kind of reflecting the internal image as well. Now, on average, companies in the United States spend about $4,000 to hire new employees, which ends up taking about 52 days to fill a position. So not only is bringing on talent an investment for the company, but please keep in mind too, it's also a personal and emotional investment for candidates who are looking for jobs and are looking to join organizations. So they want to make sure that they're going to be making the right decision, and they will be doing the extra work ahead of time. Now, the phrase culture adds, not culture fits, is something that we heavily talk about in the diversity, equity, and inclusion community. If you haven't heard before, I'm going to have to explain kind of right now what that means. So at Review Trackers, we believe that we should be hiring individuals that add something to our business and also add something to our culture. And we shouldn't be hiring people who are going to be fitting in. So when you truly make an inclusive and diverse workforce where people feel seen, heard, and included, you find individuals wanting to come to work and also bringing their entire selves to work, and then investing more energy into the business and projects because they have an emotional connection, to it. Now, on average, 91% of employees who feel they have a high well-being intend to stay at their employer longer versus 55% of employees who feel they have low well-being. Now, this kind of ties into the fact that your employees actually end up being your organization's best ambassadors. So think back to a time where you were working in a place, or maybe you're currently working there now, where you just quote unquote didn't fit in. So maybe you and your manager didn't get along, or maybe it was just a general toxic workplace environment. You most likely confided in your coworkers, maybe HR, maybe your friends and family before you ended up leaving that position. And potentially you might have written an honest review on your way out the door to kind of warn people and share your experience, so that way they would not have to go through the same exact thing that you did. Now, the same exact concept applies when you have a healthy place of work. People want to brag and want to tell people about what's going on in their organization, and they can do this through the review platform. So really creating an inclusive environment and giving people something to talk about whenever they can leave those reviews on there. So to back this theory up, 50% of people said that they would not work for a company with a bad reputation. The extra mile of reviewing, responding, and implementing change based on your reviews will save you in the long run while attracting talented people all on its own. So I think it's safe to say that 2020 has been a very hard year. We're literally only in July, and I think a lot more questions than answers have actually come out of the year so far. But one thing has absolutely been clear from the beginning, that 2020 has really shown who true leaders are within companies and communities. And that's why I kind of wanted to talk with you guys about how leadership and management should be communicating what they do know, while also being vulnerable and transparent with what is uncertain within organizations. So let's just use COVID-19 as an example. We're in the middle of a global pandemic, people. Like we're not seeing the end of the light tunnel. We're very much still right smack dab in the middle of it. So while things might not be as uncertain as they were right at the beginning, there is still a ton of uncertainty around us. So what I would suggest is that if you've not already done it, make sure that you're sending out a bulleted list where you're highlighting what you as an organization have already accomplished and what you've already done and what those next steps are going to be. This is not only, something for you to kind of keep track of as like a checklist item as when you're, moving through the motions of doing these, but this is also something that people within your organization can continuously reference to as a little bit of a beacon light and, kind of calm their anxieties around like, I'm not quite sure where we're going as an organization. They can continue to refer to this moving forward. I also think it's important to just always go back to the fact that at the end of the day, we're just all humans who are just trying to make it in life. When you go home at the end of the day or you close your laptop, if you're working from home right now, you still have a personal list of interests, problems, family dynamics, maybe some pets and animals in there as well that are just there waiting for you. So show some grace to yourself and also to your organization. Your job is only one component of your life and it should not be your entire life. So what are some of the good ways to communicate this information? Just ask yourself, like, what is the way that your organization continuously communicates? Like, is this done via Slack, GChat, email? What avenues of communication show the most engagement? Stick to those moving forward to make sure that you're sharing that information as you would share any other pieces of information. But also too, when you are sharing the information, make sure you're being conscientious of how much information is actually being shared. Too much information at one time is too much information at one time. People can only handle so much, and really weigh the pros and cons of what absolutely needs to be communicated today versus what could be communicated within the coming weeks. So that way, you're really kind of handing it out in doses and allowing them to adjust and digest that information and then ask questions. Lastly, make sure to give individuals an overview of what is actually available to them. So is your insurance covering mental health services right now? Is it also covering access to COVID testing? Really make it simple for your employees and coworkers to be able to turn to things. Just because, honestly, for me, when everything was first coming about and we shifted working from home, me going to the doctor and like finding out like what doctor was doing COVID testing was like honestly the last thing on my mind. But our operations manager did actually provide that for us, and it made it a lot easier for me to just know who I needed to go to immediately. Also too, for me, for example, in the following days of the murder of George Floyd, I actually created a Black Lives Matter resource list for our internal employees to turn to. We were having a lot of conversations, still are, but the questions I kept hearing most of was, I'm not quite sure what to do. How do I get involved? I'm not quite sure in general, where to even start. And I compiled a list of like articles, local organizations that they could be donating and or volunteering at, Black-owned businesses to be buying from that were local, documentaries check out, TED Talks, books, etc. So that's just kind of one example of how you can make things condensed and easy for people in your org to find resources. The extra steps of just like extending care and support end up going a long way and end up making a lasting impression within your workforce. So if you take anything away today from my webinar talk, please make sure you're taking away this portion of it, really embodying authenticity. This is something that you can't fake, and it's something that people can tell just instinctively when it does come to communicating and interacting with people daily. So first things first, check in with your direct reports with a general and like truly understanding that this is actually not business as usual. So I'll use the example, have you had a chance to ask your Black employees or ask your Black coworkers, how are they like mentally, spiritually, and just emotionally doing right now? This is something, this is hard for all of us are in it, and just showing that extra support along the way, once again, does really stand out. I appreciated when my coworkers actually reached out to me and asked me what I was doing. Also too, we've been adjusting to working from home or not working at all, and a lot of people have children at home, and that was a huge adjustment for parents. So, ask yourself too, like, have you talked to your workforce that have children and ask them how they're holding up with the kids being home 24/7 and also not in school now? So take time to truly connect with them and ask how they're doing and what you could be doing to uplift them at this point in time. Also too, when you're having these conversations, make sure you're asking more open-ended questions without getting defensive, and just assume that you actually don't know anything, and always being open to learning and correcting your behavior. That is true authenticity, and that's also too just being transparent and humble as well during these really hard conversations. To tie that into that, make sure to be vocal about what is important and also how to get involved. So tap into your organization and ask if anybody is involved already with, external community efforts, organizations that are providing support to the community at this time. Our one sales rep actually created this really great initiative within the Austin neighborhood here in Chicago to support the community after, there was looting right after the Black Lives Matter protest. He let us know where we would be meeting, what he needed help with, and a few of us, including myself, actually went down and we helped them out with that. So that's a great way of showing support just for people who are immediately right in your network. If you're able to, I know money's tight right now for mostly everybody and organizations as well, but if you're able to, match efforts, if somebody's donating $10 and you can do that, show that support by also matching those efforts as well. And while all these are kind of going on, make sure that you're encouraging your employees to, maybe virtually meet up and talk about unrelated work topics. People need people right now, especially right now. And you should be creating space for individuals to have that break in the day to be able to actually connect. So facilitate a team culture by encouraging employees to connect with one another through common interest. Could you create a book club? We have one here at WeTrackers. Gaming meetups, we have a lot of people that are interested in gaming. I'm not too sure, but I think there was a Dungeons and Dragons campaign that was going on still, while we've been transitioning from work from home, which I think is great. For us too, we use Slack as kind of our main method of communication. And we have a bunch of Slack channels that actually have nothing to do with work. So we have a wine and cheese club. I know our CEO, Chris, actually hosted a virtual wine tasting group, which is cool. My favorite group in our Slack channels is actually the dog channel. So if I'm feeling anxious or like I need to take a step back from my work for a second, I normally hop on the dog channel and just scroll through all the videos and pictures that people are posting of the dogs throughout the day. So it's just nice. So why are we talking about all this kind of stuff? So on average, 26% of executives said that employer reputation was the most recruiting advantage. So to go back to your employees are your best ambassadors, give them something to feel proud of when they leave their reviews about their place of work, and allow them to just, naturally attract your future talent by being authentic and talking about what is going right within your organization. Which kind of brings me to the next question: how do you actually monitor that employee feedback? So first things first is respond to critical employee feedback during this crisis. It's going to be hard to do so. I mean, taking feedback, good or bad, is sometimes just hard in general, and especially during crisis. But post-crisis, new candidates that are on the job market and or have been laid off during this time might be driven away from applying to your organization or even accepting a position at your company after reading negative reviews if they do not see that complaints or issues are being addressed. One cool thing that our CEO, Chris, actually does is that all the reviews, and you guys can go and check out our Glassdoor after this if you want, good or bad reviews that are posted, Chris actually goes in and acknowledges that he's read it and responds back, normally with a very thoughtful type of response. I've honestly never seen companies take this approach before, let alone the CEO doing it. And that was something that actually kind of made me want to apply for this organization whenever I was interviewing with them. So I encourage you to also kind of take it a step further with this and just ask your employees to leave feedback about your organization. And when they do, actually stay on top of that feedback, answer and address those questions and concerns that they have, while ensuring that your employees feel supported and that you're going to be handling those next steps on how you can alleviate, maybe things that are not going right within the work. Another thing that we actually do at WeTrackers, which I haven't seen too many organizations do previously, is after every single on-site interview that we have at the company, I send our interviewing candidates an anonymous survey that asks them questions about the on-site interview. So it's probably been a little while since you've interviewed at the company, and you probably forgot what the interview process was like, as well as what you thought about it. But this really allows us to get a sense of like, what is the external impression that people are gathering about our organization before they even get to the offer and before they actually sit down the first day of work. I do also share this feedback with our hiring managers in a private Slack group, so that way we're all on the same page when it comes to what we need to be doing moving forward and what we can do to be correcting this behavior. And creating an employee-centric culture, have a game plan on what it's going to actually be looking like to return to the office, while keeping in mind this has been a serious adjustment for people, and returning to the office is going to be scary for some if you decide to actually return to the office and you're not going to be working from home moving forward. So provide support for those workers that do actually have families and children, and what that's going to look like as they transition back. Do you offer them part-time in the office versus like fully remote instead, and allowing them to adjust to that change moving forward? Also, too, you need to be thinking about how are you going to set your office up when it comes to social distancing? Are they going to have to wear masks? What are the regulations? Do you allow only certain people in an office per day? So make sure to have that game plan, these thought processes going on if you are considering actually opening back up your business. Now, the more proactive you are with utilizing platforms such as our own Review Trackers platform, while being attentive and just honest with what your organization is doing versus what needs continuous improvement, a greater chance of creating a stronger business ends up emerging out of it. Now, moving forward, what is it that we actually need to be doing, and what can you be doing moving forward with purpose and intent? I think it's important to note that right now, companies and people need to be actually practicing what they're preaching, and that's the only way to really show solidarity and allyship with coworkers and just people in general. So allocate a budget for all the things that we're talking about now. Schedule repeated training that supports your action steps. If you've now made a statement internally and externally that you stand with the Black community, as well as your Black employees, what is that going to actually look like moving forward? I think a lot of companies right now have posted that Black square, or like mentioned that they stand in solidarity, but their actions their words aren't really matching like what they're doing. Starbucks, for example, that was something that was a little bit shocking to me. Same thing for COVID-19. So also to make sure that you're hiring with intent. This goes back to culture adds versus culture fits. Hiring underrepresented and minority groups into leadership positions, or hiring them into roles where it's like that career path is going to get them into leadership at some point within your org, allows them to really be involved with hiring decisions, and allowing for more individuals from underrepresented groups and minority groups to come into the organization to be adding something else. On top of that, choose what trainings your organization actually needs, so that way when underrepresented groups, Black people of color come in, they actually do feel that inclusivity, and it's an easier transition for them. Another thing that we do actually at the company is we have scheduled lunch and learns. We were doing them once a month, but not gonna lie, it's kind of fallen off over the past couple weeks because there's so many things that have been going on. But lunch and learn is a great thing for people to look forward to, while also continuing education around the conversations that you're having. So mental health, ways to be an ally to the LGBTQ+ community, how to support your Black employees, and just general training as well. Team meetings, make sure you're keeping those consistent, as well as one-on-ones, with the intent of sometimes just not talking about business. Once again, hold space for the individuals during these meetings without the intent of trying to solve something for them. And lastly, we need to just be celebrating people who are people. Everybody has a story, and right now people need people, like I said before. So some cool things that we've done is we've celebrated Earth Day, we celebrated Pet Adoption Day to recognize our fur babies. We just recognized Pride Month, and we had a history and podcast on the Stonewall, as well as about Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. We're going to be recognizing Juneteenth this upcoming 2021 as an organization, and just getting involved with the community as well. So that is all I have for you guys today. I would love to be able to kind of talk about questions right now and see if you can answer them if you have anything. Looks like we've got one. So it says, when it comes to communicating these updates, is it best to do through email, a video and voice call, chat, or some other method? I think that's first off a very good question. I would gauge kind of the importance of what you need to be talking about. Like if you're just doing an update on like, I don't know, something small, then probably just like Slack or sending a quick email will suffice. But if you're having a conversation about like asking your Black employees how they're doing right now, I would make sure to dedicate time and like actually do it face to face. Obviously, I can't go over to someone's house right now, but scheduling a video chat with the intent of just talking about that is going to come off a lot more sincere than just like shooting them in quick Slack, like, hey, hope you're doing good. Let me know if you need anything. That's not authentic, and that's just you kind of doing a check mark item. Good question. Really good question. Anybody else? You can drop them in the box down below. Okay, got another one. It says, do you have any tips for building in structured ways to combat Zoom fatigue from doing so much video conferencing, or creative ways to include employees outside of just video calls? That's a great question. And that's something that I'm actually honestly trying to figure out right now. A lot of our culture initiatives, which I can share. So we did one thing called Donut Gig, where when we were in the office post-global or pre-global pandemic, this AI essentially pairs random people up from different departments once every other week. And we encouraged them to go get coffee or lunch together. They could end up expensing that report. That was just a way for us to like have them meet other people that they normally wouldn't meet outside of their departments. And that's been something that's been a little bit tough for us to adjust to, because now everything is through Zoom meetings. To be totally honest with you, something I'm working on, I've encouraged people that if right now they are experiencing Zoom fatigue, which is definitely very real, please look it up if you're not quite sure like why you're feeling tired during these Zoom calls, to honestly just take a step back and not engage at this time, but maybe, you know, still stick to our other Slack groups that we have that encourage, you know, communication and just getting together that aren't involving Zoom meetings. Another question, let's see. If people aren't on board with some of these updates, for example, returning to the office, how should you handle this? That's something that, that's a great question. For me, you know, that's definitely like a leadership, you know, like CEO, C-suite level type conversation and decision that needs to be had. But I think that you should continue to work with being flexible. Most organizations are seeing that the work from home lifestyle is actually working, and it is absolutely going to be a hard adjustment to go back to being in the office 24/7, 9 to 5. On top of that, you're going to have to be doing public transportation maybe if you're living, you know, in a city such as ours, such as myself. So that's something that where you should once again kind of show grace and recognize that people are people, and this job is just a component of their life. You know, they're going to have to reshift everything for them. So once again, you know, that wouldn't necessarily be my call in my organization, but I would encourage you to be flexible with that and maybe consider, you know, if you are looking at bringing people back in the office, maybe test driving it where people come in, you know, twice a week for only a certain amount of a lot of time, so that way they can adjust to being back in that and getting that groove before you just throw them completely back into, you know, full-time 9 to 5 in that office. Question. Next one is, how frequently should you ask for employee feedback through Glassdoor or Indeed? Another really great question. I try and do it at least twice a year. I don't make it mandatory though, because you're not going to get authentic reviews and feedback if people feel it's being forced upon them. So at least twice a year, I would say. If you're doing it like every week, no, you know what I mean? Nobody wants to continuously, you know, search for something. But doing pulse checks, you know, maybe once every 6 months, twice out of the year, I think is an appropriate a lot of time to be asking for feedback. But also to go in knowing that people might not want to give feedback, and that's okay too. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in at this time. So if you do have any other questions that you think of after the fact, the marketing team is going to be following up with a recap of the information that I talked about with you today. And hopefully that they'll be sharing with you my contact information. You're more than welcome to add me on LinkedIn and ask me any follow-up questions if need be, and I'm more than happy to provide that support for you as well. Okay, oh wait, actually, sorry about that. I think one more question's coming in. Okay, so it says, do you believe that working remotely will make it harder to promote an inclusive company culture? Great question. I think the answer is yes, and also no. People and companies and people in my space are going to need to get creative when it comes to creating that inclusive company culture. I'm talking with you guys through a laptop right now, which I can't see you. I can't read your facial expressions. I don't know if you're retaining the information that I'm sharing with you, which is hard. Because 90% of interaction is actually through body language. So people are going to have to get creative with how we end up doing it. Is it something where it's like you end up doing these Zoom meetings, once a week, where it's just you're not talking about anything work related. You guys are just actually hanging out. One thing we do is that we have happy hours every Friday from I think it's 4:30 to 5:30, where everybody has a wine glass in there and we're actually just hanging out and talking about how our week's been and stuff like that. So yes and no, because this is a hard transition for everybody, and I've never personally been in a global pandemic before, and we're being presented with a bunch of different hurdles and obstacles around that. But I think that once you tap into that creativeness of it, of what you could be doing, and maybe even asking your coworkers and employees what they want to be doing, you'll find something that works for your company as well. Okay, I think we're all good on questions right now, and we're actually almost right at 11:30. So like I said, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. The marketing team is going to be following up with additional recap of what we've got going on. Hopefully they can share my information as well. But just want to thank you guys again for hopping in today and taking time out of your day to listen to me chat for 30 minutes, and hope you guys have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon, okay?